With the introduction of Velious came a whole bunch of new tailored armours for basically all of the non-plate wearing classes. Shamans got Arctic Wyvern armour, Rangers got Tiger Raptor armour, all of the Intercasters got Ice Silk armour, Rogues got Haze Panther armour, and Monks got Black Panther skin armour. Now all of these sets have extremely good stats comparatively to the sorts of armour that were available in Classic and Kunark, if you weren't an endgame raider at least. Compared to each other, some classes fared better than others. Rogues, for example, get a crazy allocation of raw combat stats for a complete set of Haze Panther skin armour. But at the same time, Haze Panther skins are a lot harder to get than Black Panther skins. But that's not to say that the other sets are no good. All of them are really strong and have varying difficulties to acquire. As you can imagine, in the early days after the launch of the expansion, everyone who could use these armor sets were trying to get their hands on them. There was a huge rush. Most people just buy the armor straight up from tailors, but you guys know that I like to do things the long way in Classic. It's a big part of what makes this game so enjoyable for me, and it makes the payoff when I finally get to the end that much more meaningful. The very first thing I started doing was farming Panthers in the Wakening Lands. Luckily at the time I was also getting a small amount of XP for killing them, but this was just the first step towards gearing myself out in a set of my own Black Panther skin armor. I still remember the first 2 days of Velious. People were selling Black Panther skins for like 700 platinum a pop. To put that in perspective, once the markets leveled out, they averaged at about 100 platinum per skin, and nowadays they go for half that. Haze Panther skins, on the other hand, for some reason I remember struggling to sell them at one point for 200 platinum each. Nowadays they apparently go for 1,000 each. I have a very smart friend who played the market during this early period, and he made absolute boatloads of money off the tailored armor market. The Wakening Lands is a pretty cool zone. It's kind of wedged in between these two opposing factions. It's got Kale Drackle on one side and Sky Shrine on the other. The zone is pretty much a giant forest. It's very similar to Emerald Jungle, but at the same time I feel like it's less claustrophobic. I get lost in EJ all the time, whereas in Wakening Lands, I feel like I always have a grip on roughly where I am. Over on the eastern wall near the Kale zone line, you can find lots of frost giants. I have heard people saying that Wakening Lands is one of the best places to raise faction with the Koldan Dwarves and Claws of Vishan. The Kale zone line seemed to be a very popular place for people to gather up and kill frost giants. The midsection of the zone is full of roaming mobs. You get mercenaries of all sorts, fairies, fairy dragons, trixies, unicorns, tiger raptors, flying monkeys, black panthers, haze panthers that go invis when they're out of combat, and almost all of this stuff is hostile. At least to me anyways. Luckily though, almost all of the roaming stuff is between level 35 and 40. So for me, starting out here I think at level 52, it wasn't that dangerous. But man, could it be frustrating at times. The zone's also got some other cool stuff. There's a cute little fairy village, there's a place called Unicorn Valley. The entrance to Plane of Growth is here for when you want to get together with your friends and go kill Tunair. There are caves in the south that have Targoos and fairy dragons and Geonids. There's also a dragon circle here that you need to go pick up your tooth. That'll give you access to the portal. This coincidentally is right next to the spawn point for Woshi, who is a very nice dragon unless you have no COV faction, in which case he will melt your face off with an AoE poison spell / stun. Trust me, I speak from experience. Down in the southwest you have the Holgresh lair. Now this is where the Holgresh Elder Beads used to drop. So a quick little tangent. Holgresh Elder Beads are an item that anyone can click from their inventory to cast Eye of Zom. Now Eye of Zom is a low level mage and wizard spell. What it does is it summons a level 1 magical eyeball that you get to take control of to scout around the vicinity of your character for about 30 seconds. Hostile monsters will aggro the Eye of Zom just like they would aggro any other level 1 player. The eye is then instantly killed and the aggro gets transferred over to the caster. What this means, however, is the beads are especially useful for monks, because mixed in with Feigned Death, there are all sorts of really powerful tricks and shenanigans you can get up to with the Eye of Zom. I mean, you can use it to pull mobs through doors and eat harm touches, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't even really know about because I've never had the opportunity to try it out. It's not just monks though, other classes get a use off of this as well. I mean, you can mallet off this thing, necros can use the Eye to Life tap off of it if there's nothing else around. Because of all this utility, the Holgeresh Elder Beads were removed from the game 5 months after the launch of Velious. Now all the remaining Elder Beads that exist on this server are now worth close to 300,000 platinum each. But people knew all of this going in, and that's why the Holgeresh layer was permacamped for the first 5 months of Velious. I did attempt to get in on the action once during that time, but I would have struggled to hold the room by myself, as it's pretty much full of caster mobs. But yeah, I mean, I ended up farming Panthers here in the Wakening Lands on and off for a while. I mean, I don't feel like it was that long, but you know, without any sort of tracking, my approach to this was kind of just run around like a dickhead until you see one and then kill it, and then rinse and repeat. I do feel like I got pretty lucky with the drops most of the time. I ended up with close to 40 Panther skins by the time I was ready to get my armor made, which turns out was a massive overkill. Panther skins though were only the first step to getting my shiny new set of armor. The next thing I had to do was get Velium ore so that I could forge Velium bonings. As far as I'm aware, the best place to get Velium is in Crystal Caverns. The entrance to this zone is in the Rigor Fortress in Eastern Wastes. Once you load in, you're dropped into this mine shaft and the area is filled with orcs. Their levels range from late 20s to early 30s, so you know, being 50 plus, they didn't pose any problem. From here I pretty much just fight my way down, killing every orc that I can find. Most of them seem to have a chance to drop a random piece of ore. Now this part of the zone looks like a tangled mess, but it's actually not that bad. Usually any of the strayed tunnels or turns are either going to lead to a dead end or they'll be the way that you want to continue deeper into the zone. I tell you what though, levitate sure does come in handy in this place. Now at the bottom of the mine you emerge out of the rock and into the ice. Down here is an entrance to a small Coldain town. This is really fantastic because not only are there vendors down here, but there's also a bank that you can use. Moving past the town, you go further down into the caverns. From here on, you start running into mobs that are from anywhere between level 30 to level 40. This is also where the zone splits up and it really starts becoming interesting. Eventually you get to this three-way fork. On your left, you'll fight tentacle terrors. If you go straight, you get all these crystal spiders and eventually you get to a room where this Queen Drachnia spawns. If you go right, you fight Geonids until you reach the back exit of the zone. And if you're feeling really adventurous, there's even a vein of water that runs underneath all of this that is filled with tiny little water dragons. I find this zone really fascinating. Back on live, it terrified me, so I never really explored it. It really did not feel like it took long at all to fill my bags and my bank full of ore. Carrying all of this stuff becomes an issue. Most of these ores don't stack, and they all weigh a lot. But I only had to make a few trips down to Crystal Caverns before I had more than enough to make all the materials for the armor. The next step was to get my blacksmithing up so that I could turn the ore into bonings. Now, I believe you only need to get to 45 in smithing before bonings become trivial, but if you play as a monk, I would highly recommend taking smithing to at least 60 so that you can make forged javelins. These are throwing weapons that have a huge range. I always carry a stack or two on top of my shurikens in case I ever need the extra 145 points of range to pull a mob. If you're like me and you hear the words trade skill in EverQuest, you probably automatically just go, ew, that sounds hard. That's what I was like anyway. It turns out the early stages of smithing is super easy. I spent about 180 platinum. It took me under an hour. I got my smithing to 60 and I made 14 stacks of javelins. There's a really good guide to raising your smithing skill on the wiki if you want to check it out, but I'll just give you a quick rundown of what I did. I did all of this in Caverns for obvious reasons. I hear that Caverns is actually one of the best places to do trade skills though, because everything is here all in one central location. I've never really tried in any other zones, so depending on where you are, there might be a bit more running around between vendors. I went to the monk trainer and I put 1 skill point in blacksmithing just to start things off. I don't think this is necessary to do, but it made me feel better. I also bought a couple of extra backpacks just to carry all the stuff that I was going to use. To start off, I bought 4 stacks of water, then I went over to the blacksmithing area and I bought 8 stacks of small ore. You basically just need twice as much ore as you have water. Head over to the forge and you put 1 water and 2 ore into it and hit combine. Each successful combine will create 2 metal bits. These will take your skill up to 21, I think, but you want to keep making them until you have around 6 stacks of them. The guide on the wiki says to make 16 stacks, but I think this is because it's designed to take you further than 60 in skill points. I made 6 stacks and it took me to 59, so it worked out pretty much perfectly. Obviously, there's a bit of luck involved with skill ups, successful combines, and failures. Remember, in classic EQ, when you fail at a trade skill combine, it'll destroy the items that you used in that recipe. So once you have all your metal bits, you need to go buy some more water. You also need to buy scalar molds this time. These don't stack, so depending on your bag space, you might need to make multiple trips. Now you take 1 water, 1 metal bit, and 1 scalar mold into the forge and create a scalar. These scalars don't stack, and apart from being created to level blacksmithing, it seems that they serve no other purpose. So once you fill your bags with them, just go and sell them all to a vendor. You want to create scalars until you reach 40 in blacksmithing. From here you go back and buy more water, but this time you're going to need lantern casing molds and bottles. I bought 2 stacks of them from the brewing vendors next to the bank. Combine 1 flask of water, 1 metal bit, 1 lantern casing mold, and 1 bottle in a forge to create a large lantern. I did this until I reached 59, which is when I ran out of my original 6 stacks of metal bits. Now we can just start making javelins. For these you need sheet metal and javelin molds. The molds are sold by a different smithing vendor in Caverns. I believe he's over near the Warrior Guild. The sheet metal is bought from a merchant out on the trade skill island, pretty close to where that initial forge is. The sheet metal costs 1 platinum per sheet, and each sheet on a successful combine will create 2 javelins. So this is where money starts coming in. It costs roughly 10 platinum to make a stack of 20 javelins. Considering the utility that they give you, and the fact that you can usually sell stacks of javelins to other players for around 50 platinum, it's a really good price. So that's how I got my blacksmithing high enough to make Velium bonings. If you are planning on making the bonings yourself, a good tip would be to craft a file while you're here in your home city. You need the file to make Velium bonings, which are easiest to make in Thergoden, but there are no file molds available in Thergoden. All you need is 1 metal bit, 1 flask of water, and the file mold. The file gets returned to you for each boning combine attempt, success or fail, so it's just handy to kind of have one in the bank. You'll also want to grab a smithing chisel so that you can break down large bricks of ore to the size that you need. These are just bought off a blacksmithing vendor from various starting cities. The same deal applies to the chisel. You'll get it back each time you use it, so just keep it in the bank. Now that my smithing's at an adequate level and I have all my Velium ore, I had to go over to Thergoden. I'm sure this place needs no introduction. It's where people call home in Velious if they chose to side with the dwarves over the frost giants. It seems on P99 at least, that's the majority of players. Luckily there's a bank in here, so it's going to make things easy. For Velium bonings, we specifically need small bricks of Velium. You're most probably going to have a variety of different sizes of ore from the orcs. You can break apart blocks into large bricks and large bricks into small bricks. You just have to put the larger piece of ore in the forge along with the chisel. Each large piece of ore will convert into 2 pieces of the size below it. You can combine smaller pieces to turn them into larger pieces too, but I wouldn't recommend this, as for each combine to upscale ore requires 1 Coldane Velium temper, and those cost around 30 platinum each. Not only that, but it requires an extra piece of the smaller ore for each conversion. So if you want to make a small brick, you would need 3 small pieces of Velium, whereas you would only get 2 small pieces of Velium back if you broke down that small brick. This ratio applies to all sizes of ore, so it doesn't seem efficient to upscale ore. Remember, there's always a chance to fail when you're trying to upscale or downscale, and you'll lose all the ore of that combine in the process. If you're like me, you probably have a stack or 2 of the small pieces. I would recommend keeping that to either sell to other players or to craft into something else. So once you have all your ore turned into small bricks, you need Coldane Velium temper. This is bought from a guy called Nimren Stonecutter. He's in this unnamed building around the back side of Thergoden. Each one will cost around 30 platinum, so you want to be specific with the amount that you buy. You're going to need 1 temper for every 1 small brick of ore that you have. Head back around towards the front of Thergoden to a shop called Underbelly's Arms. There's a forge in here that we can use. All that's left to do is take the file that we made earlier, 1 small brick of Velium, 1 Coldane temper, hit combine and hope that you don't get many failures. I ended up making 37 bonings. Again, this was overkill for the amount that I actually needed, but you can usually sell any extras off to tailors for a profit on what you paid to make them. At this point, I'm super close to having my set of new shiny gear. There's just one more thing standing in my way. Yew leaf tannin. Yew leaves are a foraged item from the Wakening Lands. You use them to create yew leaf tannin with the brewing skill. Now as an Ixar, I have forage as a racial bonus, but its skill caps out at 50. I want to say the entire time that I was here farming Black Panther skins, I think I managed to forage up one single yew leaf. There are supposedly ground spawns for them here in this zone, but I've looked multiple times and I've never found a single one. Your best bet is to do what I did and just buy them off druids and rangers. I think I bought a few here and there, and then eventually I found a guy that sold me a whole bunch of them in bulk. They go for around 50 platinum each these days, and sometimes you'll find people selling the tannin for the same price as the yew leaves. Yew leaf tannin becomes trivial at 68 in brewing. So as I like to do as much of this stuff as I can myself, it was time to learn how to brew. This is almost as easy to raise as smithing, but it did seem to take a little longer to get skill ups when I was brewing than it did to get skill ups for blacksmithing. I did a little bit of research on the wiki and the forum, and it seems that trade skills improve based on your intelligence or your wisdom, whichever of those two is higher. The better that those stats are, the better your chance of getting a skill up with each combined, success or fail. Now, you know, as a monk, neither of those skills are anything to brag about for me. I think my wisdom is the highest at 80. Looking further into the same forum, I found that some posts mentioned for blacksmithing, strength also comes into play. That would make sense for a blacksmith, you know. But according to the people that were posting, strength only increases your chance of a successful combine, not a skill up. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the deal is. There is an entire section dedicated to trade skills on the wikis that has a whole lot of information on the inner workings and all the mechanics explained by people a lot smarter than me. So if you find all that number crunching stuff interesting, I'd really recommend go checking that out. Anyway, none of that really matters considering I'm only taking these trade skills to around 60 points. The brewing guide on the wiki is actually split into two different guides. One specified for players based in Antonica, and one that's specifically for Ixars. The Ixar guide, however, seemed to consist of a whole bunch of juices, so for the first 35 levels you have to do stuff like berry juice and orange juice. All of those seem to require foraged materials. Maybe there are vendors in Caverns that sell all those fruits, but I didn't see any on the wiki and I was too lazy to go and look myself. So what I planned to do was make short beer until 31, mead to 41, short ale to 51, and then ale all the way to 68. All of these require similar materials. When I first started, I was getting a whole lot of failed combines on the short beer with no skill ups. Probably because the trivial for this is 31 and not 21, so I decided I'd swap over to bog juice. You know, I've always had a giggle at bog juice. I know it's used for the start of the Paladin EverQuest, but every time I read bog juice, man, I just have to laugh. In Australia, bog is slang for either toilet or taking a shit. So to me, when I read bog juice, I either read toilet juice or shit juice. Anyway, I digress. Bog juice is very easy to make, but it requires snake scales. Luckily for me, you can buy these out in the Field of Bone. Take one snake scale, one bottle, and one flask of water into a brewing barrel to make your bog juice. It seems that most of the time in brewing, if you fail a combine, you get the container returned to you, so you won't need as many bottles as you will the other materials. Bog juice took me all the way to 21. From here I started making short beer again. This takes one barley, one hops, one malt, and a cask. Again, the cask is returned on failure, and they don't stack, so don't feel the need to buy a ton of them at first. Short beer took me to 31, where I moved over to mead. This takes one yeast, one hops, one malt, and a cask. This will take you to 41, where you'll move over to short ale, one barley, one hops, one water flask, and a cask. Short ale goes to 51, and then it's on to ale. One barley, one malt, one flask of water, and a cask. Ale is going to take you the rest of the way to 68, which is exactly where you need to be to make the yew leaf tannin. All up, it cost me about 15 platinum and took me just over an hour. The yew leaf tannin itself is extremely simple. It's just one yew leaf and one flask of water. I don't think I failed at all when I was creating mine. I ended up making 13 of them. With that done, I had everything I needed to make the Black Panther skin armor. There are 12 pieces to the set, and each piece takes one Black Panther skin, one yew leaf tannin, and between 1 and 4 bonings depending on the size of the piece. They also require the standard armor patterns that correspond with the slot being made. These are bought from tailoring vendors for basically nothing, and tailors usually carry around stacks of them, so I didn't have to worry about that. I was only specifically after the legs, arms, boots, gloves, cloak, and neck. So even accounting for potential failures, I ended up with more than enough extra materials that I wouldn't need. All there was to do now is to find a high-level tailor. I don't know the normal etiquette for this. I had a look on the forums, and there are plenty of people out there that take tailoring orders. But what I ended up doing was just sitting in East Commonland's tunnel, waiting to find someone selling their services. This was the first time this tailor had taken a request to just do combines with someone else's materials. So neither of us knew what the norm was in terms of cost. We ended up agreeing on me paying him 100 platinum per successful combine. There only ended up being 2 failed combines out of the 6 pieces, and that was the arms, which failed twice. So luckily I only lost 4 bonings, 2 pelts and 2 tannin all up. I ended up tipping this guy an extra 100 plat and the 3 leftover panther skins from my stack. I guess I was feeling generous at the time. But he also bought the leftover 20 bonings, paying 75 plat for them each. So I turned out making a nice little profit. And that's it. That's my set of Black Panther skin armor. As you can see, it's a really nice stat boost over the Crescent gear I was wearing. It pretty much always hides under my robe, but it's a really dark blue color, so dark that it's basically black, and it uses the Velious textures for leather. I'm going to wrap this one up here, guys. These videos are all still playing catch up to where my monk currently is in game. The next video will probably be going through my journey of getting the Howling Stones and the Old Severus keys. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you later.